So my parents passed away in a pretty horrible accident, and I had one choice. Do I raise my stepbrother or let someone else raise him? Well, I decided to raise him since he was 9 years of age. Well, this is where the story takes a pretty big twist. Once he gets to the age of 19, he's completely out of control, he doesn't respect me anymore, and now he's trying to sue me, saying, hey, you didn't give me anything that our parents left behind. I don't care if I was 9 years old when they died. I want half of the house, and I want it right now. So I decide to tell it little brat this. As a child, my mother was fond by saying, never bite the finger that feeds you, because if you do, there's going to be a consequence. I looked after and raised my younger stepbrother when he had no one, and in return, he did not just try to bite my finger, he tried to eat off my whole arm. And now he has to face the consequences. Inasmuch as I would not want to share my story here, I have to, because I need help. Growing up, well, I had the best family in the world. Both of my parents are deceased, and they were the best parents any child could ever wish for. During the time, there were no fights. They took care of me and provided for me, and I still have images of my dad rolling on the lawn with me because I messed up my shirt. I was afraid my mom would be mad. He did this so he could make his t-shirt dirty too. That way my mom would be mad at both of us, and we would take the hit together. From when I was young to when I clocked 9 years of age, things were absolutely perfect. We always hung out together as a family, and we took a few vacations too. But a couple of months after my 9th birthday, everything changed. At first, I noticed my mom was always yelling at father, and literally everything just made her angry. Even though none of them refused to open up or tell me why they were always butting heads with each other, I gathered from their conversation that my mom was angry with my father over, well, a woman. I wasn't surprised when I found out because it was not the first time my mother would go weeks without talking to dad. It had happened at least 3 times as I grew, and each time that it happened, I knew they were fighting because of a woman. My dad was into real estate, he was good looking, and he was also doing great financially. He had great clients, and we lived in our own house. Although he was in his early 40s, one could barely tell because according to him, he had good genes, and he took good care of his skin and looks, and somehow, this attracted a lot of women to him, including the good, bad, and ugly. Aside from the fights where my mom would go a week or 2 without talking to my dad, they had other fights too, you know. But they were never really that serious. It was either a woman called and my father would have to hide, take the call, or he would be talking to the other woman and would save their contacts with a male name. So my mother would basically just believe he was on a business call whenever he showed his phone screen to her. But it was not my father's constant cheating that changed our lives or changed my life. My mom was used to that, and I was too. She wanted to leave him several times, but because of how much she loved him, she simply couldn't. They would always just reconcile after a fight, and my dad always made it up to her by just taking her shopping or getting her some sort of expensive gift. Also, my mom was a full-time housewife, and even though she wanted to at least work or open her own pastry shop, she loved baking. My father did not allow it. He wanted her to stay at home and look after me while he remained the sole provider of the family, but not just that. Now that I'm grown and I understand what happened, I'd say my father was insecure and manipulative. He didn't want my mom to live the kind of life that she simply wanted to, so he could feel safe. And he would convince her to the extent that she would make it sound like it was her own idea to be a full-time housewife and always recite that the most important thing in the world was looking after family, me and my dad. For years, I had witnessed a few of my mom's close friends telling her how much she had changed, and they tried to persuade her to pursue the things she wanted like she did while she was back in college, but no matter how hard they tried, it always fell on deaf ears. My mom would tell them she was comfortable, even more than them,
And in the end, they would end up fighting until she no longer had friends showing up at our doorstep. So in the end, despite going to college, graduating with pretty good grades, and having a head full of dreams and visions, my mother never got to work at any of her dream organizations or even her own pastry shop. Until, well, she passed away. She always chased her friends away until she had no one to turn to whenever she truly needed help. 3 months after my 9th birthday, I was upstairs playing with my toys when I heard my parents fighting again. This time, it was the loudest I have ever heard, and a couple of crashes followed the noise, and upon getting downstairs, I met my mom with her eyes swollen from crying, and the moment she saw me, she tried to act okay. Then she told me that my dad had something to tell me, and at first I thought they were going to break the news of the divorce to me because I knew there was just a tiny bit of thread left before my mom would say she wasn't interested in this marriage anymore. But my father did not say anything about divorce. Instead, he told me I had become an older brother and I was going to meet my baby brother soon. Although that was good news, I did not understand why my mother was so upset about it, and I'll admit that I was so excited. But it dawned upon me that people had to get pregnant first to give birth. At least I understood that part. And at that point, there was no sign my mother was pregnant. Well, it turned out that my father cheated on my mother again, and he got the woman pregnant. Later on, I learned that my father tried to get rid of the baby, but the woman who later became my stepmother insisted that she was keeping it, and she wanted her baby's father to be present in his life just as my father was present in mine. There's no need to ask what she wanted this for. She saw money, comfort, and she figured my father was her ticket to a good and comfortable life. At the time, my mother was not only heartbroken because, well, my father cheated on her, and he got somebody else pregnant, but because my father's girlfriend was moving into the house with us. And my dad did not want my mom to leave. He threatened that if she left, she would not take me with her, and he would sue for child custody. My mother knew if he presented a strong reason in court, my father would definitely end up with me, so she stayed just to look after me. One of the reasons why was my mother's alcohol addiction and her history of depression. Over the years of tolerating my father's infidelity, it began to isolate from her family, friends, and dreams. And trying to raise me to better than my father, she fell into depression and I had to depend on medication to see herself through it. As soon as my father's girlfriend moved in with us, things took a different turn. My mother could not even hide the anger and hate that she had for my father's girlfriend for ruining her home, and somehow she passed that anger towards me. Even when my younger stepbrother Max was just an innocent baby, I didn't like him, and my mother forbid me from touching him at all, and on the other hand, my father's girlfriend was such a drama queen. Ugh. She expected my mother to be her maid, and when that did not happen, she caused a lot of issues between my mother and my father. Whenever my father was around, she would act all nice and innocent, and whenever he wasn't, she would show her true form. She was a young woman in her mid-20s, while my mother was in her late 30s. As time passed, my father started siding with his girlfriend more, and even stopped sleeping in the room with my mom. He would yell at my mother, humiliate her in front of his new girlfriend, and even though my mother was stubborn, she stood up for herself and acted tough on the outside. Whenever my father yelled at her, she would break down in tears whenever she was alone. Our house literally became a war zone, and most times I did not want to go home after school because of the nonstop nagging and annoying cries of my stepbrother. But whenever I remembered my mother needed me, I always went back. When my maternal grandparents found out what was going on, and they asked my mother and me to move in with them, my father kicked against it immediately. He insisted that he was my parent and he wanted me in the house at all times, and he agreed that my mother could go, but that would mean she handed me over to my father's girlfriend to look after me, and the moment he said so, my mom was forced to turn down her parents' offer. My late mom continued to suffer silently, and it even affected her appetite and her physical health. A lot of times she told me she was tired, she felt trapped, and she regretted not leaving the first time she found out my father cheated. The thing is, she did not leave because my father promised her that he would change. He did. Just that. It was not the kind of change she was expecting. His change leaned more towards the negative side, and he kept getting worse and making more promises. For the following years, my mom was all I had, and she was literally my best friend ever, although my father's attitude did not change towards me. My mother did not know who he was anymore. He focused more on his girlfriend, and she became the queen of his heart. My stepbrother, Max, had also grown, and even though his mother warned him several times to not go close to me or my mother, he did not understand. He was just nothing more than a child, and his mother scolded him 1 minute for smiling or waving at me. The next moment, he would bring his food to share or something. Despite Max's little innocence, my mother wasn't having it. Aside from warning me not to touch him when he was a baby, she never said anything else. Her eyes and body language did most of the talking, and I was smart enough to understand what she was saying. The hatred between my mom and my father's girlfriend, oh boy, it grew. But there was nothing that my mom could do about it. My father's girlfriend tried to convince my father a lot of times to buy her and her son a new house, but my father refused. The funny old man insisted that he wanted his family to live together, and he would not do such a thing, which was very frustrating for my father's girlfriend because she knew he could afford to buy one or more houses for her if he really wanted to. Also, over the years, my mother's health deteriorated and she sank more and more into depression. Our communication and other things dropped at one point, and she was no longer interested in doing some of the things that we used to do before. Things like shopping, going to church, watching TV, etc. By this time, I should have suspected that things were getting worse for her, especially when she'd assured me that she was fine without me asking. Unfortunately, when I was 13, I woke up one morning and my mother passed away. That was literally the absolute worst and most heartbreaking season of my life. Seeing her lie lifeless on her bed is one of the images I just can't get out of my head to this date. The cause of her death showed she overdosed on her dosage. She took many pills, and yes, I believe she knew what she was doing. Her death broke me into 1,000 pieces, and I did not think I could live another day without her. Eventually, we buried her, and after her burial, I told my father I was moving in with my grandparents, my mother's parents. Staying back at our house would simply bring bad memories for me, and God knows, I might have either harmed myself or my father's girlfriend if he did not let me. My father resisted at first, but later on, he agreed. I did not just blame him for my mother's demise. I blamed his son and his girlfriend. They all contributed to it one way or the other, and I hated them. I hated them with so much passion for taking my mother away from me. 3 months after my mom's burial, my grandmother broke the news that my father was getting married to his girlfriend, Max's mom, and they were throwing some big luxury party. I was so angry, and the young me thought of ruining his wedding, but unfortunately, my grandparents took me on 1-week vacation because they could not bear the heartbreak too. By the time we returned, everything was done, and we returned to our normal lives. We lived in a small town, and the news of my father's marriage after his first wife's burial was the talk of the town. It was literally on everybody's lips. But a couple months later, my stepmother, because of the topic of gossip, my father had gotten her a beautiful black car, and she was always seen in it driving carelessly and playing loud music. She was also a crazy shopper, and one time she was embarrassed for shoplifting, which spread very fast within the town. I ended up completing high school at my grandparents' house, and when it was time, I got admitted into our state college. Meanwhile, as years passed, the relationship between my father and I was not repaired. It took me 2 years after my mother passed away to start talking to him again. Also, I simply just could not accept his new family as part of my family, especially since my mom's depression got worse after Max's mom got involved with us. Well, speaking of Max, he grew up to be as entitled as his mother, and he always had this frown whenever my dad invited me home for Easter, Thanksgiving, or Christmas. We also did not get along because there was no reason for us to talk or get to know each other. From the way he acted, it was so obvious that his mom had filled his heart with hate towards me, and I did not plan on fixing that, you know. Sadly, another tragedy hit me just when I was struggling to get close to my dad again. I was in college that day when I get a call from the police in our town that my dad and stepmother were involved in a ghastly car accident. None of them made it. This news caused my world to crash again, and even though I did not have a great relationship with my father, and there wasn't really a lot going on between us, I would have still preferred hating him for the rest of my life to him dying and leaving me with nothing. No parents. The news of his death saddened me, and after months of mourning, I realized no amount of tears would bring him back. Max was only 9 years old when this happened, and I was the same age when my father brought his mother home, and losing both parents on the same day took its mental toll on him. He literally became a shadow of himself, and worst was, he did not have any other family aside from us. He was going through so much, and I felt so terrible. I could not turn my back on him. Long story short, out of pity and knowing what it felt like to have no parents in the world, I settled my score with Max and accepted him as my family. It was funny how hate could turn to empathy in just the twinkle of an eye. Because of this, I moved back into my parents' house and I looked after Max until he became an adult. I closed my ears to everything the neighbors and my townspeople said about my decisions to reconcile, and I treated Max as a sibling I never had. The good thing was, my father still left, well, me and his next of kin even after Max and his mother came into the picture. And his house, money saved, the life insurance, everything was given to me. The money was what we used in serving and taking care of Max and just seeing myself through college as well as helping Max start college. I thought he would grow to be one happy family and just always be in each other's life, but guys, I was mistaken. About a week ago, after Max and I had a little altercation, he told me that he wanted to have half of the house, and if he did not get it, he would sue me in court. I thought he was joking until he smashed my laptop in anger, and now I don't know what to do. Even as I type this, he's been threatening me and calling me names, and somehow I'm afraid of what this 19-year-old can do with the wrong set of friends. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. That is the end of the original post. There is 4 updates I managed to find. 3rd update and the 4th update were in the comment section, but I have everything. Every single timeline that leads to the end of this story compiled right here for you guys. We are about to hit 100,000 subscribers. If you want to help reach that goal and you want daily videos, hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much, and let's jump into update number 1. Hey everyone, thank you for your comments. Actually, I did not think it was a bad idea to look after and raise Max. What kind of brother would I be if I didn't? I know my mother would not have supported the idea if she were still alive, but I felt it was the right thing to do. And now I'm beginning to regret that, and in the past few weeks, Max has turned into an entirely different person. He no longer talks to me with respect, and he just threatens to have, well, it's become more intense. For those of you asking about the altercation we had, this is what happened. As Max grew older, I told him it was okay to bring his friends or invite them home. I did this as an older brother, and I did not ever imagine that things would turn out the way that they did. The day before Max and I argued, he had invited a set of friends over. He knew I did not like them, mainly because I caught them doing drugs in our kitchen. And each time they were at my house, my neighbors had to call the police because they always disturbed the peace. Not just that, They were so loud, and I think they all belonged to a wild biker group in our hometown. That day when I came home, they were having sexual time in my living room, and I was so furious. No adult would walk into his house and meet teenagers butt naked doing things that they should be doing in private. So, in anger, I kicked them off my property and threatened to have them arrested if they ever showed up again. Max did not really take that very well. He said that I simply embarrassed his friends, and after leaving that day, he returned the following morning in anger. Fortunately, he met me at my home because my work allowed me to rotate between working remotely and working in the office. I did not expect him to still be angry the next day, I'll be honest with you guys. However, he was. He straightforwardly told me that he wanted half of the house because we both shared the same father and I did not have more right to use the house than he did. At first, I thought that he was joking, of course, but he wasn't. And when I told him that was not going to happen, he smashed my laptop and assured me that he would sue me in court if I wanted to act smart. And since then, the issue has absolutely escalated. He no longer sleeps at home, and just recently I found out that he squandered the college fund I gave him. I was so mad. Just yesterday I got served, and I cannot believe that Max would go as far as suing me in court over my house. All this while, I never had an issue with housing him. I provided whatever he wanted, and even put my life on hold to make sure that he got into college. My court hearing is next week, and once I return, I'm going to update everybody on how things turned out. Update number 2. Hey guys, this is kind of urgent. I know I promised to update again after the court hearing, but something else came up. 3 days ago, Max came to the house with the same set of friends I kicked out of the house the other time, and they destroyed so many things. One of them slashed all 4 of my car tires, and the other broke my windscreen. I don't understand why they did that, because after Max and I had the conversation about the house, I didn't see him again. I only asked him to not return to my house until our court case was over, and he left angry. I'll admit that my tone, yes, was a bit harsh, but I did not physically assault him or anything. I don't even push him, he left on his own. As if doing so much damage to my car was not enough, Max let them into the house and they trashed literally everything. I had to throw my TV out because it was beyond repair. The most annoying part was that I was not home when it all happened. One of my neighbors reported that he had seen Max and his friends go into the house and out, and they timed me because they knew I always went for 20 minutes of work every evening. Now, I'm so angry and confused, and I don't know if the court will listen to hearsay. It was not just one of my neighbors that saw them. About 3 people agreed they saw me. And they came out of their houses to see what was going on, and when they heard a loud crash and my car alarm started ringing, although they called me before I could get home, they were long gone. I still don't get how Max, who was innocent and fun to be with, suddenly turned into a beast overnight. I know insurance can take care of things like the car and a few things in the house that were covered, but what about things that weren't? Right now, I'm in the middle of a big personal project, and fixing my house was not part of the plan. As for Max, I don't if it counts, but I got a text message from him that reads, "I hope you love your new house," with a grinning emoji beside it. I know he did it, but I need solid proof before I can countersue. I only had a couple of days left before I have to appear in court. What do you all suggest that I do? Please let me know. Update number 3. I'm so thrilled to tell you all that the court ruled in my favor. Initially, most people believed that I would end up dividing the property with Max, and I'll admit I was scared. According to the law, the property belongs to me, and I can only choose to give Max a part of it if I want to. He was very disappointed when the judge told him that he did not have a case. Even though my father married his mother, she said it would have been a different thing entirely if I was not, his next of kin. and the fact that he did not change it to Max's mother or Max himself after my mother's demise meant that he wanted it this way. Another good news is, I was able to prove that Max vandalized my vehicle and trashed my house. One of my neighbors, who saw Max in his quote, Men in Black, had a camera outside his house, and it was able to pick up Max and his friends as they arrived and left. Initially, when I countersued Max, he said, I could not prove it was him who did it because I wasn't at home. But when the camera footage was played in his presence, he could not say a word. As for the damages, he was asked to pay for all things that were not covered by insurance, and he was also charged an additional fine for breaking and entering. Funnily enough, he claimed it was not breaking and entering because he had his own key. And the moment he said that, the judge passed judgment and our case was over. Although I'm happy Max will literally pay for his sins, I'm quite sad that our relationship will no longer remain the same. Right now, I can't help but wonder about the next thing that he'll do. And even if he tries to come back, it's better that we just stay apart for a while. As for the personal project I mentioned in my last update, it's my wedding and I'm planning, and it's right around the corner, so wish me luck. Also, it's official that Max and I will no longer be living together. He packed his things out of the house yesterday, my fiance's idea, and I think it's the best thing for us. I still have a soft spot for him, but it's heartbreaking that he allowed his friends to put silly ideas in his head. Update number 4. Thank you everyone for the congratulatory messages. By the way, I got married to the love of my life a week ago. Also, as you read this, Max and 2 of his friends have been arrested. I'll be getting a restraining order for him as soon as he's charged and released, and after things turned out the way they did between Max and me, I thought that it all ended. I'd not heard from Max for almost 7 weeks. And suddenly he called on my wedding day, and it was awkward to see his name on my phone screen, especially since I was not expecting him to call or attend the wedding at all. When I took the call, he spoke to me briefly and asked me to speak to my fiancée, which was odd. She was in a panic and she kept yelling at Max to let her go. And I could hear another man's voice in the background. It took me a couple seconds to understand what was going on. Max had posed my wife's driver and he took her and her maid of honor. That was the height of it, and I could not believe he would do that to me on the happiest day of my life. In order for me to get my wife back for the wedding, he asked me to pay him $50,000. And that was when I knew I had to involve the police. Everybody was just waiting in the church, and I was on my way to church too when I got the call. Thankfully, he was foolish and he did not even know the basic things about taking someone against their will. So, it made it easier for the police to trace him, and they rescued my wife and her maid of honor. According to my wife, she did not know it was Max until he followed a different route and she suspected something was wrong. After his location was discovered, the police arrested him and 2 of his accomplices, and the wedding was a little late, and I would never believe that Max would go that far to mess this up for me. He claimed he wanted to borrow my wife for a few hours, and he did not plan on kidnapping my wife and her maid of honor, but he was still arrested for kidnapping. I've decided to just cut all ties with him, and right now, whatever punishment he gets, I think he deserves it. I don't know if he believed that I hated him, and that was why I did not let him hang out with that terrible choice of people he calls his friends. Now, he has seen how it ended, and I no longer want him to be a part of my life. Especially now that I'm building a new family, I don't want him to set a bad example for my children, and I don't want him in their lives. Anyways, thank you guys for all your support. You're nothing but a lifesaver.
So that was a pretty wild story. There's 2 takes in the comment section, and let's talk about them. The biggest one is this. They think that OP should have given, Max half of the money, because they think that Max deserved it being next to kin. But there was other people that said, oh no, Max was vandalizing OP's belongings, Max was hanging out with the wrong crowd, and he simply would not listen to anyone. So it's kind of split in the comment section, and I just want to know where you guys would lead to. Would you give some of the money to Max, or would you just stay in the house and you say, you know what, Max, you're not getting anything. I won in the court battle, you get nothing. So drop your thoughts in the comment section. Let's discuss this one, guys. If you're new to the channel, my name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories every single day. I hope to catch you tomorrow. Have an amazing day, and remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya!